Welcome to the Happy Rebel podcast, where we explore the realms of finding your calling, living your values, and doing the work of self-healing. Through candid conversations with fellow seekers, we'll uncover ideas and concepts that challenge, expand, and empower us to embrace our authentic selves and live with intention. Hi there, I'm Kelly Street, owner of Happy Rebel and your guide on this journey. I'm known for my insatiable curiosity and tendency for pushing boundaries. I've always been a challenger, eager to question the status quo and explore the uncharted territories of personal growth. So join me as we navigate the twists and turns of life's journey, seeking out the wisdom and insights that illuminate our path towards fulfillment and rebellion against the ordinary. Before we get started, I want to remind you to connect with me on Instagram at Happy Rebel, where you can ask questions and share your thoughts. Remember, you are never alone on your path to becoming a happy rebel. This is the Happy Rebel Podcast. As we enter the space of the Happy Rebel Podcast, I invite you to gently focus your eyes, or if possible, allow your eyes to be fully closed. Take a deep, cleansing breath and exhale to ground into your body. Inhale deeply, visualizing a golden light in your heart center. With each exhale, imagine that light growing stronger and brighter. Continue breathing as you prepare to honor the complexities of life, embracing the balance between the light and the dark of your own experiences and in the conversation to come. With gratitude for this small moment of grounding and connection, slowly open your eyes as we begin this podcast adventure together. Hello, Jaime. I am so excited for our conversation to come, and I can't wait to hear everything you have to say. But first, I want everybody to know who you are. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kelly. It's so good to be with you. I'm so excited for our conversation today. Oh, there's always so much to say when someone says, let's, introduce yourself. But what I would say, I think in terms of our conversation is that I have a business called Whale Song Creative. It's under my name, and I help people write books. So I help people write, edit, and publish books in the transformational nonfiction space. So people who are writing about the stories and ideas that really matter to them, people who are here on a mission, people who are here with a story in their hearts to share. I get the great pleasure and benefit of helping them bring their creations to life and to doula them or steward them through the process of bringing into form what is intangible and what is in their hearts. So that is the work that I do in the world. I occupy the territories of both the healing world and the writing world. So I have kind of a unique position where I also do my own like healing arts work as a practitioner. And so when I partner with people who are also in that realm, I'm able to really meet them in the worlds that they inhabit, whether they're speaking about different healing modalities or different bodies of work or stories that they're alchemizing into medicine. I'm able to really walk with them as a fellow traveler as well as a guide.
Mm.
So that's a
I
little
think
bit.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's so interesting that walking in both worlds, or like walking in two worlds, kind of an aspect, because I think sometimes, I wonder if this ever feels this way for you. Do you ever feel sometimes torn between the two worlds, or do yours just blend perfectly and beautifully together?
Oh, I wish it was always perfectly and beautifully. I've always wanted to like sit still, like I have these two parts, these two parts of my service in the world, which is the healing work and the writing work. And I've always, my conscious self has been like, just stay still, you two, like get in order. Like which one of you am I working on? Which one of you am I doing? And they've always wanted to live together. So it's really my problem that like I've always worked on how they go together. But when I tap into like my self energy, what I know in that place is that I sometimes say like this place has been circled on the map for me, which is I've been given the opportunity in this life to really go deeply in honing the craft of writing. So, I have a master's in writing and in teaching writing. I was a college professor for a long time. I've been in the writing industry for over 20 years. So I have the skill set and the background and the kind of technical side of writing. I've written books. I've helped lots of people write books. I have all this expertise. And then I have this heart of a healer and a visionary. And in that space, there's really no problem. Like in that self space, there's really no problem. Like it's actually perfect, because I'm often that person that people are looking for when they have a really close to their heart project. They want someone who understands their world and really can accept their world, right? And so I'm able to just come in and partner with them because I know that world so well as well. So for the higher self part of me, like the more expanded, like knowing state, there's no problem between the two. In my practical life, it's like, well, which am I giving? And how am I? I'm a human with finite resources and finite time. So like, how am I able to fulfill my mission, which is big, in a human reality? So that's where it gets a little tricky. But life usually works it out for me pretty well. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
would imagine that's usually what
yeah,
happens.
yeah,
And yeah, and this is how I know you, because you've been someone who has helped me shepherd my book through me, and as a book coach and doing some editing work. And I just want to say I knew you were the right person for me to work with when you spoke the way that you're speaking now about connecting with self and connecting with that higher self, but also those other parts of ourselves that are all around that sometimes we need to get into alignment with, or we need to listen to, or understand where blocks are coming up for us. And I knew, I was like, okay, this lady speaks the same language that I do, and so she'll be able to understand where I'm coming from.
yeah. Yeah. And I thank you for that reflection. And I think that's why this work, I mean, the healing work and the book coaching work, they're actually not a different animal. They're the same work. And that work, I would say, is really coming in and companioning someone as a full human. So it's not just like this technical, you're an author, we're creating a product. It's like you're a creative with this vision, and you're a human that has lots of different parts, and every one of us has resistance. Every one of us, I work with some of the most capable, qualified, like healing professionals, and we all have our stuff. There's no one who's immune to resistance. There's no one who's immune to this work. So my true job is coming in as a companion to hold sacred space and be like, whatever's here, we're going to meet together, whether that's on the technical side of the writing or in the human reality of doing something like writing a book. Because what I know, and what many of my clients come to find, you probably have, is that writing a book is a journey of personal transformation. Like you step into this alchemical cauldron where you're being asked to step into your next level of greatness and your next level of self-expression. And that's a journey. Like that is a quest. So I see myself as companioning people on a quest of personal growth, even if we're talking about books. So
Yeah.
it's all the same. It's all meeting
Yes.
someone where they are and letting there be space enough for everything that's here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you spoke about resistance.
Yes.
I can't believe it actually took me this long to get this far through the book, but I'm finally about to finish reading Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. I always want to say The Art of War, but it's The War of Art.
Yes.
And resistance is such a big topic in that book, and framing it in all of the different ways he's framed it. So if anybody else is interested in a creative project and finding themselves bumping up against a business, an idea, whatever, I can now highly recommend that book.
Yes.
But I I imagine that you run into all of the different forms of resistance that people have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
almost yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say I almost feel like I'm a resistance ninja sometimes. Like I'm in there just sort of like finding it and like neutralizing, not finding and neutralizing, or finding and naming and tending. Sorry to jump in. I get really excited about ironically, about resistance because I see it in a different way. Like I love Pressfield's work. He was like one of my first real teachers of
Yeah.
resistance, and even orienting around what is this thing that stops so many of us from using our creative voice. Um, so I could say more, but I'll pause because I think maybe you had a thought to finish. Did you want to say anything before I kind of run into my jam on resistance?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that I imagine that there's this I can see how much the healing arts that you've been doing come into play because you almost have to act as a shaman or a therapist to really guide people through that process of resistance coming up in all of the different forms that it can show up for people, whether it's,
Yeah.
a health crisis happening, uh family emergency, going on trips, like whatever it might be,
Mhm.
resistance can just kind of pop up and get in the way of our purpose pursuits.
Yeah.
And it can look just so different for so many people.
Yeah. It's a very tricky energy. It can be kind of a
Yeah.
trickster energy. It can shapeshift into anything and sound very
Yeah.
compelling. Yeah. So for me, much like in my healing arts work, like I show up, my orientation is to show up and be so present and to be a
Mhm.
seer, like to really see behind, like see the energy behind what someone might be bringing or what they might be
Yeah.
saying, and to really listen for what's needed in a moment. And so I think it's more of an art than a science. I think it's listening because there's the energetic, right? So sometimes a major health crisis is a stopping point in a creative project. Like it's wise actually for us to pause. In other moments, it's an opportunity to get more creative and to pivot. So it's not like a one size fits all, and that's why I think it's helpful to work with somebody that can hold the container with you because it's not like here's the formula to apply to your resistance. It's like we have to meet it in the moment. And for
Mhm.
me, my another I think important part of how I orient to resistance is and this you said like coming into the healing work is so instrumental in this space because I don't believe that we need to eradicate resistance and I don't believe we need to fight resistance, like our inner critic, these
Mhm.
saboteur parts, whatever we want to label them as. I see them as really important protectors in our system, and I know through experience that when we can really meet them and listen to them and understand what they're having to contribute to us, we can dance with them, or we can like allow them to be in the space in a way that honors them and their message, but doesn't. I always say, and we can say this in other spaces as well, like they get to be here. They do not get
Mhm.
to drive this, like they do not get to be at the helm, like they don't get to drive the ship, they don't get to get they don't get to get behind the wheel, they don't get to run the show, but they get to be here. And we want to listen to them, we want to listen to what these parts have to say. And also resistance, as you learned from Pressfield, it's not that creative. Like it has a greatest hits track of like, so some of Resistance's greatest hits are, who do I think I am to do this?
Mhm.
I'm not qualified. I'm not smart enough. I don't know enough. I don't have the authority, or I'm too this or this. It's pretty uncreative in that space. Like it says that to everyone. So it's easy to catch if you're listening for it. It's like, oh, that's
Yeah.
resistance. Okay. Um, so it's helpful to neutralize those things when we can see them for like, oh, this is actually like a program that runs in the psyche.
Yeah.
It's not me. I don't have to, like, I can be with it, but it's not me.
Yeah.
And so there's a way to work with it when we can see it as like, oh yeah, this is what this thing does and says and feels like. And we don't have to believe it necessarily. That doesn't mean to disrespect it, but we don't have to believe everything it says to us.
Oh, yes. Isn't that the truth? We don't have to believe everything it says to us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of those are definitely the ways that resistance shows up for me for sure in all of those ones. And I think sometimes also being especially being in the space that you're in with people of this nonfiction in the healing world place, that I know one of the blocks for me is like, ooh, am I allowed to share this in the world? If I say this, will this hurt other people?
Mm,
Or if I say this, does this leave me too exposed? And so I wonder how you guide people through those deep, deep personal stories that they have to share that feel so scary for other people to see or to read or to hear about.
yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that a lot of the people that I work with encounter, because it is really brave, bold work to be willing to speak out loud. And this is why it's a journey of transformation, is because some of the biggest core things about being human are evoked in this process of telling our stories or sharing our ideas, which is like, am I allowed to speak here? Am I allowed to use my voice? Am I allowed to take up space? Am I allowed to say what I know and what I feel and what I've experienced? Is it safe for me to do that? And then what's
Yeah.
the impact of that? Will I be rejected? Will I be cast out of the tribe? I mean, that's a very mammalian question. Will I be cast out? Will I cause harm? These are big questions that are often in the field when we're working on something dear to us. So, some of the things that I offer in this space, the nice thing about writing a book, when we go up and get on stage and speak, like whatever, and even in this moment, like whatever comes out of my mouth is what's here. Like it is the final version, right? Whereas in a book, we can write something, when we're working on a book or something written, we can write whatever we want and we get some time and space. I always say there's many gatekeepers built into this process. Um,
Mhm.
so what I say to my people, the way I orient is, the beginning of when we're here to express what we're here to express, that first step is always like, it's you and truth in a room. And your
Mm.
job is to be in allyship with truth. Like it's you and truth and creativity in a one space. And that's where a relationship is. How do I say what's true? How do I say what's in my heart to say? How do I express that in a way that feels authentic to me? That's the only business at first. It's the only business, the only thing that matters.
Mhm.
And then later on, we can decide whether what you shared, what you got on paper, whether anyone else ever gets to see that. We get to decide. Sometimes you can say, you know what, I needed to say that thing. I needed to work that out on the page. And it's not for everybody. I don't want to share
Yeah.
that with the world. I'm glad I shared it though. And so for me, the first thing is always like, let's just be free. There's so little space in our world that we get to be truly free to say what's true for us. So we get to have gatekeepers later. Like, okay, the way I said that, like I needed to kind of get some anger out there. I needed to say that in that way. That's not how I want to present it to the world. I can see the impact of that. So we begin to manage the relational field beyond ourselves later on. Like who's going to think what, and what. And I always say too, I mean, anybody who's writing personal story, that's always a piece. Like, how are people going to respond? How's mom going to respond? How's friend going to respond?
Mhm.
How's ex-husband going to respond? Um, and those are real questions. So we don't take them as like, well, who cares what they think? Or, it's a middle road of like, let's care about impact. Let's consider impact, and let's consider your self-expression, and we fine tune and make decisions that feel right to the author because they're always at the helm, as we go.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard other just in the writing space, I've heard the book before the book.
Mm,
So, writing the book for yourself or writing the story for yourself
yeah.
before, just to get it out and to put it out into the world, or to put it on paper for yourself so you can see it and you can know that, wow, my truth is written down somewhere. And then writing the version that you're comfortable with
Champ.
everybody else seeing, or writing the version that other people can find themselves in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
That feels
think,
like the really tricky part is, at least, okay, I think it was I think it still feels tricky for me. And so I wonder if you have any advice for this,
yeah.
is writing a personal story that somebody else can then find themselves in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is edgy work. Like, I just want to name it is
Yeah.
edgy work to share ourselves. And I can say, even in my own, as my own creative, right? Not as a guide, but as my own, I'm an author and a writer and a creative, and it's an edge for me. Like, it's easy for me to back up and hide and not expose. It's hard to expose. So I just
Mhm.
want to name that. It's hard for me to expose to. I'm not like, hey, it's not a problem for me. It is an edge to expose ourselves in writing. Um, and it's daring. Like I say, like that's why I say this is really bold work. I don't know if this metaphor will serve anyone. It's a little bit of a strong metaphor. I'm very much a metaphor person, but I say like writing memoir sometimes can feel like you're in this like tidy little neighborhood where everyone's like, all dressed up and they have their nice cars and all their lawns are manicured, and you go outside and like get naked and set yourself on fire. Like it's so exposing. It's so exposing to reveal yourself in a way that we're not
Mhm.
accustomed to revealing ourselves in our culture. Like we don't have the clothes and the identities and all the things that keep us safe, socially. It's like
Mhm.
we are revealing ourselves. It is a naked thing. It is a naked, we become naked on the page.
Yeah.
And the truth is that the more naked we can get on the page and the more true we can get and the more specific that we can be to our experience. I always say there's this interesting paradox, like the more personal, concrete, and specific we can be with our storytelling, the more universal value it has. Like when we can
Mhm.
get to that truth of our experience and articulate it for ourselves and for others in a way that other people have felt but not been able to articulate, that is the medicine of the word, is being able to say what no one else dares to say, to expose what no one else is willing to expose. Because at our core, we're all longing for truth. We're all longing to feel what it's like to be human and to have it reflected back to us. So it's the work of an artist to dare to expose and reveal and express what is at the fringes of what we're typically allowed to share.
Yeah. Woof.
That was a lot.
Uh, I think so. Okay, so on the topic of truth and writing your truth, I
Yeah.
think this is one of my points of resistance that comes up for me
Mhm.
is, well, it's my version of the truth, or it's my version of what happened.
Right.
And that is such a tricky little spot to get yourself in,
Right.
because you can really stop yourself from sharing things that have happened to you if you believe that, well, it's only valid to me because it's only my experience and somebody else may have had a different experience.
Yeah. Yeah. We can get kind of tentative with it, right? And like, it's just,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah. What do I want to say about that? I mean, I feel the multiplicity of truth, like that I think in my own being, and even if we look at parts work, like even parts of ourselves have different stories about experiences. And I think it's a gift for us to be able to look at an experience we've had and look at it from multiple angles and look at the different truths and the facets of truth that it has. And there is something about the choicefulness we make as we create art, like in the written form, which is like
Mhm.
I have a particular something to reveal in the way that I'm sharing this truth. There's something about the way that I'm storying this that's important. There's something in the way that I'm revealing this thing about myself that does matter. And I just want to, there's a lot of layers in this realm that we're working on right now, is that there are a lot of, this is again why it helps to kind of get specific with somebody where they're right in their story. They're right in that, what's the edge of this inside this story for them. Is it like, I don't know if I have the voice, or I don't know if I can stand for what I know, or I'm afraid of being considered an imposter or a liar, or, like whatever it might be. There's lots of things that can come up in this space. So I think for me, it's like helping people get aware of like, what is it here in this story with this thing that is hard? What are the beliefs that are coming up? What are the feelings tied to this? What are you afraid might happen if you tell this story? What are you afraid might happen if you don't tell this story?
Mhm.
Right? Because there's something we lose when we're not willing to say what's true and
Yeah.
share what's true also. So
Yeah.
I think I complicated it,
Ooh.
but yeah.
Yeah. I'm sitting over here reflecting on all of those questions and just going like, okay, all right, that's note to self. When I go back and edit this, I think I'm going to just write down all of those questions for myself, and every time I'm coming up against that when I'm doing my writing or editing work, I'm probably going to be like, okay, what am I afraid will come up, or what am I afraid will happen if I do tell this, or if I leave this part out?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why this is work of personal transformation, is that we become more aware. It's like the book work gives us a container and a stimulus to engage with whatever is here for us that we need to see, to know about ourselves, to accept, to tend. We find those edges, we find the fear, we find the things, and we meet them. And I
You
think my
do.
job as a coach is to help people keep going and to help them, like, so they don't have to be alone in that process. Because I don't know, it's something like 80% of American adults want to write a book and like 0.03% ever do. There's like a high failure rate because there's a lot of off ramps. There's a lot of possibilities for us to get, kind of paused or frozen in the process and not be able to move through these big, really human, really tender questions. And it sounds like on the outside, well, I got busy. I just got busy, my business got
Mhm.
busy and I stopped writing my book, or, like this thing happened, or I was on from some vacations. Like, yeah, that's all true. But there's something that happens really deep inside of us
Yeah.
that makes us pause. That actually is what makes us pause.
Mhm. Yes. I wanna go I don't know whether it's going back or fast forwarding, but there's something I want to know about helping people find their voice, or even just people, doing this work on their own, because I think that's something that comes up for me. I'm a huge reader. I've loved reading memoir since I was a preteen,
Mhm.
and just reading all of the different I remember reading Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt when that came out, and just loving how he told his stories and how he shared his experience, all the way to Mary Karr, all the different memoirists that are out there.
Yeah.
And finding myself being like, "Oh, should I take some of that? Should I add humor to it? Should I, how do I say what I want to say in a way that will resonate with people, but still be authentic and true to myself?" So that is my long way of asking you, or saying, how does someone start to learn what their voice is
Yeah.
in writing?
Yeah. It's a great question. I sometimes look at voice
Thanks.
in a simplified way, which is not going to help us help us a lot right now. But I'm like, well, voice, like, we can get complicated about it, but I'm like,
Yeah.
voice, you finding like what is here and bringing it out. So I think there's like layers that go around that of like, oh, I have to sound like this person, or I have to sound like that person, or I have to do this thing. And I think it's almost like just like a sculpture. We actually have to like whittle that away to find the form. It's actually like getting those things to move out a little bit so that the
Yeah.
thing that's in the center can move through. It's not
Mhm.
like we have to go pluck it out and bring it in. It's actually, we have to like remove some things in order to get to that voice. So I want to say at first, like, our voice is always here. We've never lost it. We've never not had it. It's really about like letting go of the noise around it so we can listen for that voice and actually hear it and bring it through. So that's one thing I will say, is that I think voice is always there. We just have to like uncover it. And so sometimes we have to uncover it by playing. We have to play on the page. What does it sound like? What is real and authentic for me here? Am I kind of playful in my writing? Am I kind of serious in my writing? Um, what are some of the programs about writing that I have to undo in order to get to voice, right? Like the way teachers have taught me how to write, what's good writing, what's bad writing. So really, again, it's like a process of like clearing away some of the noise and the debris in order to get to like, oh, this is true, this is me, this is my voice. And we don't have to take it so seriously. I think that's why I said play. It's like, let's bring it into play. Explore what is here. How do I want to do, what feels good in me when I start writing in this way, or what lights me up. I think that's a great indicator when we're creating something. It's like, if it's going to light you up, it's going to light your reader up too. Like, you find that sweet spot. um, so that's one big piece. But then there's another piece here, which is like, how do we learn from other authors? How do we learn like style? Because I think it is important to explore technique or style in other people's writing and go, what did they do that makes this so special? Like, what is it that makes me want to read this book until 3 a.m.? Like, what is it that they do? I always say, like, you don't want to steal another author or creative's content, but you can steal structure, can steal technique. Like, you can peek behind the curtain and be like, okay, what are they doing here? What is this secret sauce? What is this magic? And I think it is helpful to expose ourselves to models that we want to emulate. But again, it gets nuanced where it's like time and place. Like you don't want to have a bunch of other memoirists' voices in your head as you're writing memoir. Like we need to kind of
Yeah.
clear them out a little bit again to find that like your voice. So there's time and place to like study structure and study style in other writers. And then there's a moment to be like, everyone clear out of the room. Me and creativity are here and we're getting to the bottom of this, and we let those voices quiet down so that we can hear our own.
Yeah. Okay, speaking of the voices and clearing everybody out of the room, I think before I started writing, or before I started getting into the book writing process, because I've been a journaler, or like writing short stories or whatever for years and years. And when I got into the process, I told myself, like, I have to clear everything. I have to have like a month where I'm by myself in a cabin, and then I can write my book.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's sort of exactly what I did to get the first draft, but also that leaves so much, that constricts so much, because then I wasn't able to, afterwards, it was like, oh, well, for me to edit this, I need another full week. And not going through with the process of just write a little bit every day or work on this a little bit every day. And so I think there are just so many stories for people to clear out, basically, when they're beginning this writing process.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated at how many of them I'm seeing in myself. And as I talk to other people, how many things come up for them too. It's incredible. So I bet you hear it all.
I hear it all, and truthfully, I experience it. Like I'm
Mm,
writing a book right now, and I can be playful with these things that come up because I'm like, oh, I see you, and I'm expecting them. Like I
mhm,
expect them to arrive, so it doesn't shock me or upset me when they come. I'm like, oh, of course you're here. Like I expect these resistances and like my little mind tricks of like, well, I can't really do it unless. And so for me, I think it's always a practice. Like I think it helps to think of it as a practice. I'm always in a practice of like meeting what is up for me and go, okay, well, how can I get creative with you? So if I think I can only write this book if I have 6 hours a week to dedicate to it and I have a really busy work week and like I have to meet that energy and be like, is that true? Or like, how can I meet this now? Like, where is the place where I can stay in engagement? This might be a little different from what you were saying, but I really think of writing a book or writing anything as like, it's relational. Everything for me is relational. So it's like, how am I engaged? Like that engagement might change. I'm not a big like word count. Like word count can be helpful. There's a place for metrics and progress in that way. But a lot of times it's like, I'm like, how am I in right relationship to this project right now? Like, how can I engage with the work? Even if I have a busy week, for example, like, can I think about it in the shower? Can I have a conversation about it? Can I sit with it for the 20 minutes I have and be like, let's go. Like, what do we got next? Like just how to be nimble in that space. Because, resistance, one of the ways resistance shows up and says, I'll be ready for this when, I've got a month or my
mhm.
kids have grown up or my parents have died or, we put a lot of conditions on when it could be possible for us to do the work. And that keeps us from doing the work. So it's about finding that place of like, what feels like a doable, tolerable next step
Yeah.
for our systems and like continuing to look for those places to engage.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder how that is for you with this new book project that you're working on, to work on your own book, but then also be helping other people shepherd in their projects.
Yeah.
It's almost like I think about an actor who is really good at taking on other accents or taking on other ways of being, and helping someone, in their other role, but then also, or like going home and living with their family while they're also like doing this movie role where it's all consuming, and just how you navigate that back and forth for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, for a while, I published my first book in 2017 and I've written a lot, but I haven't published another book. And, I'm always listening to my soul, the voice of my soul, what I would call it. And she whispers like, hey, um, what about your creativity? Like, what about your work? What about your mission work? Like, I'm not really in integrity if I'm only serving and never doing my own craft and my own work. So for me, it's like, I've had to meet that energy of like, wow, I'm really more prone to being in my service role and helping everyone else, get their expression into the world and like letting mine go quiet. And that doesn't fit for me. So I've got to keep finding a way to make space. So I've had to get really creative because I'm in a very full time in my work. Like my work is very robust. My work is very full. And I just have to make that time for myself. Like, so I have it carved out. It's not perfect. Some moments I can't meet the project the way I wish to, my own project. Um, some days I can, but I keep engaging and I keep recommitting. I keep saying like, yes, I still want to do this with you, to this creative project. I still want to do this with you. I'm not going to get this perfect. It's not going to happen exactly the way I want to, but I want to keep going with you. So I think just like a relationship, it's not like you make a decision once and then you're forever in it. Like you're always affirming. It's an action. You're always saying like yes to a thing, Sometimes we say no to a thing for a minute and then we might come back and say yes again later, But for me, and then the last thing I'll say about my own project is that I remember that accessing my own creativity is nourishment. So I think this is one thing that's really important for authors. Sometimes we feel like our project is just like another drain on our energy. Like it's another kid tugging on our skirt saying like, I want your attention. I need your energy. Right. And we're like, I'm tired. Like I've got a lot. This is a depletion. So I always try to reframe that. Like my creativity is actually a deep well of nourishment. And when I go to that well, it feeds me. So like when I get time to work on my project, I feel really fed by it. And it allows me to serve better because I'm actually serving from this authentic, integrated, space of integrity where I'm like, I'm alive. I'm doing this. I'm right here with you, and I'm at my own well.
Yeah. Okay, I don't know why in this conversation I'm just having all of these, oh, here's another resistance that I know people run into.
Yeah.
But I just have all of these things coming through me that I'm like, oh, that one too.
Yeah.
And so I just keep having to share them.
Oh, yeah.
But another resistance that I hear that I know that has come up for me is my creativity is limited, or I only have so much
Mhm.
that it isn't this deep well or this endless well of art, of creativity that can come through me. It's finite.
Yeah.
And or the sister to that, I feel like, is I can only write when I'm sad. I can only write when I'm
Inspired.
down.
Yeah.
Tired. Yes.
Yeah. Inspired. Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is what our beautiful minds do is they put limits and they say, these are the conditions upon which I can, so we just notice that like, oh, we just want to ask, like, is that true? Like, is it true that I can only write when I'm sad? Is it true that, whatever it might be? And sometimes it's going to be like, well, yeah, it kind of is, like there are days where you show up and you're like, I'm not very inspired. I don't feel really creative. I've definitely come to the page before where I'm like, why does it feel flat? It's not a good feeling as a creative to be like, this feels flat. Like it doesn't have energy right now. What do I do with that? So there's no, I wish there was like a clean formula to say here, but again, this is why I say it's a relationship. Like any relationship you're in, like there's going to be days where there's rupture. There's going to be days where you're like, this feels kind of flat today, like I'm not feeling super lit up by this connection, and again, it's like, it's staying in the relationship with it. Like it's being in the inquiry with it. So that's a piece of it. And then also it is a little tricky, right? I mean, I'm a big proponent of like, when we follow the energy, it's easier to do things when the energy for it is there. So it's a little bit of a paradoxical place. I have found in my work that anyone who comes to me and says like, my book project is just going to be this inspired, delightful, joyful thing all the time, I've noticed that those are the people that don't always write their books. Like there's just this, like, it has to be in this like really high, easy breezy frequency. And I'm like, writing a book, in my experience, it can totally be that way. Absolutely. Writing a book can be this joyous, like lit up experience, but it's gritty too. Like sometimes we got to get down and wrestle with some stuff, like it's gritty. And I think if we have the expectation that it's always going to be this light, bright, like angel, like the angels are singing to us and we're just typing whatever we hear, like that's not always true. Like sometimes we got to get in there and wrestle with something like, it has to work on us. We have to work on it. Like it's an engaged dynamic process with tension in it sometimes. So sometimes we do have to like feel that tension, wrestle with something, be like, I don't wanna, like, I mean, it's again, it's a relationship. So I think it's, yeah, we got to get into it. We got to get into it and be like, what's here for us to be with? And is it true that I can only write in this way? Is it true that I can only write in this way? Um, I don't know. The first job I ever had in this industry, writing, I had to write for 40 hours a week. Like, and I would come in the morning, I would write 8 hours a day for whatever they would give me. And it was like any part of me that was like, I can only write when I'm inspired or something I care about. I just had to
Mhm.
write. So for me, I learned
Yeah.
early in my career, like what it was like to just get in and engage. So there's something in that I was able to bring into my toolbox, which is like, yeah, I can kind of move past some of those things and just like do it. So it's sometimes too, I'll just say one more thing. I don't know, maybe people have had the experience of like thinking about going to a yoga class and you're like, I don't want to go to that yoga class. Like, I don't want to go today. I got to put on my outfit. I got to get there. I got to move my body. There's going to be people there, and then sometimes the hardest thing is just getting there. And then once you get there, you're like, oh my God, I had the best practice. I'm so glad I went.
Yes.
So sometimes the hardest part is just coming to the seat and getting in your
Mhm.
chair and starting. That is sometimes the hardest thing. That's where we have the most resistance. All the resistance happens here. It doesn't happen in the action. So if we can move from the loops here into something, into doing something, engaging with it, we can usually get out of those sticky places. And then we find like, oh, actually, I really do love this. Like I'm learning, I'm finding something
Yeah.
here. I'm now in the relationship rather than just thinking about it. I'm doing it. So getting into the doing and finding your way is the way to go, in my opinion.
Mm. Yes. I love all the questions that you ask. I think that's one of the beautiful parts of the process is like you're not denying this experience that anybody or that you yourself are having. You're just getting curious about it. And I
Yeah.
think that's so much of the process that I have found that needs to come in or that just naturally happens as you're writing is like you're getting curious.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Writing is a process of discovery. Like we think it's going to be, sometimes we think it's going to be, I'm just going to sit down and write this thing. I already know what it is. I'm just going to write it down. It's not a recording process, although there's an aspect of recording and documenting and naming and articulating, but it's really a process of discovery. Like we don't really know what this thing is until we get in with
Mhm.
it. We're like, oh, I had no idea. And so it really is a process of discovery. And I can say, I'll try to share a very brief client story without a lot of detail, but I've been working with this woman who has been working in a nonfiction book and she's got this beautiful body of work to express. And I'll tell you, we've been in conversation, like there's been many tears. And she has for a long time, she was like, I hate this book, Jamie. Like, I hate this project. I hate it. It feels like I'm eating dry cereal, like there's just something here. And I just kept meeting her in that moment. I wished I could offer her a simple solution. Like, well, if you just do this. So it was always a process of like, let's just keep engaging with what's here. And the
Yeah.
magical thing that happened was one day something showed up on the page that hadn't been there before. And we both felt it. We were like, what? I was like, what is this? Like, what is this thing that just happened? She's like, I don't know, but I'm feeling it too. And I'm like, let's follow it. It's like meeting a creature in the forest. She's like, what is that? I'm gonna go follow it.
Yeah.
And her book project is totally transformed. She is now writing like a story, like an allegory that shares everything she has to share, but in story format, because that's how she needed to bring this through. She is loving it. She's so engaged in the process.
Mhm.
She's sending me material all the time. Like this thing is moving through her. And it's all because we've stayed with the process. Neither of us has given up. I haven't given up on her and been like, well, you just can't get it together and you can't do the thing you're supposed to be doing. It was like, no, it's okay. Let's just meet what's here. I have no control over outcome here. She might abandon this project next time I talk to her, but right now we're both choosing to stay together in this. And something neither of us could have ever anticipated emerged. And she's on
Yeah.
fire now. She's like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever done. Like this thing is lighting me up. It's feeding her. So I
Mhm.
name that story because sometimes we don't know what's coming. and the engagement in it and keeping with it, being like, man, this is hard. I'm really working through some tension here. I don't know what to do. The more we just stay with that, the more like we make room for the magic to come. And I can't orchestrate it. I wish I could just like press a button and the lever brings whatever person needs. But I keep finding in my own work, it's this process of being in it with people and just staying the course. And I am always in awe at what emerges.
Mm. Oh, perfect. That's so perfect. That's the place. I love it. Okay. So with all of this magic that you help people create in their lives and sharing their stories, how would someone come to work with you or come to get connected with you?
Yeah, the best place for me is my website, which is jaimefleres.com. And it's JAIMEFLERES.com. I have a lot of resources there, a lot of details about the kinds of work I do there. That's really where I'm easiest to find. I do have social media and that sort of thing, but I'm usually so busy these days that I'm in a lot of project work rather than a lot of content creation work in the world in this moment. So yeah, my website's really the best place to find me.
Perfect. Again, as I shared earlier, highly recommend working with Jaime if you are looking for someone who can help shepherd your book into the world and find all of those blocks and challenges and reframing your story so that it's open for others to find themselves in. So thank you, Jaime.
Thank you.
And thank you for being part of the Happy Rebel podcast community. Stay connected with us on Instagram at Happy Rebel. If you've enjoyed our episodes, please consider rating, liking, and reviewing the podcast. It truly does help us grow. Until next time, this is Kelly Street. Remember, embrace the dark and the light.